People say the American dream is a promised land, a place where sweat can be exchanged for success and effort for peace of mind. But no one tells you this. The wealthier you become, the more eyes are watching you. And sometimes the most dangerous gaze comes from the person sitting at the same dinner table. 2 massacres, 2 countries separated by half the globe, yet haunted by the same disturbing question. If we live with kindness and help others, can we truly avoid disaster? In this video, we will explore 2 family massacres so brutal they seem almost unbelievable, revealing that the darkest place in the world is not the ocean depths, but the human heart. On the evening of April 9, 2010, the police station of Mangcheng County, Anhui Province, received an emergency call. On the other end of the line, a child was screaming hysterically, crying that intruders had broken into his home. Along with the child's desperate pleas for help, officers could hear the sound of doors being kicked in and furious shouting, all blending into utter chaos. 5 minutes later, police arrived at the address the boy had given. It was a standalone building with a sign hanging out front that read, Yongkang Rolling Shutter Store. After repeatedly calling out with no response from inside, officers climbed through an open first-floor window to enter the building. The moment they stepped inside, they were hit by the overpowering stench of blood. When they searched a room on the second floor, the officers were stunned by what they saw. Inside lay 2 adults, a man and a woman, along with a child, all lying in pools of blood. Continuing their search of the second floor, police discovered 2 more bodies inside another room that had been locked. The victims were later identified as Dai Zhongwei, the owner of the Yongkang store, his wife Zhang Baomei, their 12-year-old child, and Dai's parents-in-law. A forensic examination revealed that all 5 victims had suffered multiple stab wounds. Their time of death was determined to be no more than 5 minutes before the emergency call was placed. Police found damage to a locked bedroom door in the eastern hallway of the second floor. The door frame showed signs of forced entry, and 2 right-foot footprints were visible on the door, one measuring approximately 9.8 inches, the other 10.6 inches. Based on these markings, investigators believed 2 perpetrators were involved. They had kicked in the door to carry out the attack. Because the room was in complete disarray and the floor was soaked with blood, police concluded that the Zhongwei family had been murdered immediately after the child placed the emergency call. It is highly likely that the boy's attempt to call for help enraged the attackers, prompting them to kill all witnesses to eliminate future threats, even stabbing the victims further after they were already dead. Despite evidence of a violent struggle between the victims and the killers, no fingerprints were found at the scene or on the victims' bodies. This suggested that the perpetrators were highly skilled at avoiding detection and had worn gloves during the attack. But what was their motive? Soon, a padded jacket found at the scene caught investigators' attention. The jacket was draped over a chair in the room, and inside its pocket was 30,000 RMB in cash. In addition, another 10,000 RMB was discovered under a pillow on the bed. Such a large amount of money had been left untouched, indicating that robbery was not the motive. After a thorough search of the crime scene, police made another crucial discovery. Inside Zhang Baomei's handbag, they found a business card bearing a bloody fingerprint. Testing confirmed that the fingerprint belonged to Zhang Baomei herself. Investigators concluded that she must have pressed her finger onto the card after being injured. The deliberate act of leaving behind a bloody fingerprint raised a chilling question. Was Zhang Baomei trying to leave a clue for the police? Further investigation revealed that the business card belonged to a man named Zhang Jianli. Police quickly located Jianli and brought him in for questioning. When confronted by investigators, Jianli showed no signs of panic. Instead, he appeared calm and composed. He stated that he had been running a lighting business in Mangcheng County for many years and had frequent business dealings with Dai Zhongwei. According to Jianli, not only was there no conflict between them, but they were actually on good terms, giving him no reason to kill Zhongwei. However, when questioned about his whereabouts on the night of the murders, Jianli began to hesitate. He claimed that he had been drinking heavily with friends that night and was so intoxicated that he could not remember anything that happened afterward. Jian Li's explanation failed to convince investigators. Yet without concrete evidence, police had no choice but to release him, unable to formally charge him with the crime. Police turned their attention back to the crime scene. If they could recover the killer's DNA from the scene and compare it with Jian Li's, all doubts would be resolved. A violent struggle had clearly taken place inside the house. There was no way the attackers could have left without leaving traces behind. Sure enough, based on the physical evidence and blood patterns at the scene, forensic technicians concluded that both attackers had been injured during the assault. The problem was that the killer's blood was mixed together with the blood of the 5 victims, making it extremely difficult to isolate. But persistence paid off. After days of continuous testing, technicians discovered traces of the killer's blood on a wall near the staircase, hidden within the victims' bloodstains. Forensic experts collected samples and, after repeated testing, successfully separated the blood of 2 perpetrators and extracted their DNA profiles. However, when compared, Jian Li's DNA did not match either profile. The business card had been stored in the inner pocket of Zhang Baomei's handbag, and the fingerprint on it also belonged to Zhang Baomei herself. On the surface, it appeared that she had taken out the card, pressed her fingerprint onto it, and then placed it back inside the inner pocket. If Jian Li were the killer, this would suggest that Zhang Baomei was deliberately pointing police toward him. But the DNA results proved otherwise. Jian Li was not the murderer. After further discussion, police put forward a bold new hypothesis. The bloody fingerprint may have been deliberately left behind by the killers after the murders, intended to mislead investigators and frame Jian Li. Under this theory, everything suddenly made sense. At first, the large amount of cash left at the scene led police to believe the murders were driven by personal hatred. But after interviewing neighbors and relatives, investigators learned that Zhang Wei's family lived quietly and rarely had conflicts with others. This raised another possibility. The true motive may not have been revenge, but money. Yet if robbery was the motive, why would the killers leave behind cash that was both openly visible and carefully hidden? Taking the scene into account, police concluded that the attackers likely fled because they realized Zhang Wei's son had already called the police. From the moment the call was received to the officer's arrival, only 5 minutes had passed. When the child made the call, the killers were still inside the house. Fearing that police would arrive at any moment, they did not dare stay longer to search for valuables and instead fled in haste. Knowing the police had been alerted, the 2 attackers would almost certainly avoid main roads. That left only one option: the farm paths. The victim's home was located on the outskirts of town, surrounded by vast farmland. Police began searching possible escape routes through the fields near Zhang Wei's house. No murder weapon was found at the scene, and since the attackers were injured, their clothes would have been stained with blood. Their first move while fleeing would have been to discard these incriminating items. Using Zhang Wei's home as the center point, police conducted a search within a 3.1-mile radius. The search quickly yielded results. About 1.25 miles from the victim's house, officers found a remote vacant lot surrounded by wheat fields and a river embankment. The area contained a dirt mound and an abandoned well. Near the mouth of the well, police discovered fresh bloodstains. At the bottom of the well, they recovered 4 suspicious items: rubber gloves, a nylon face mask, and a black jacket. Forensic examination revealed traces of the victim's blood on the black jacket. One of the rubber gloves had been torn by a sharp object, likely cut accidentally during the attack, injuring the killer's hand and explaining the blood left at the scene. In addition, technicians discovered a small piece of white fabric sewn into the lining of the black jacket, bearing handwritten characters that read, "Wang Yijian owes 10. Wang Yijian sounded more like a nickname than a real name. Police immediately began investigating it. Before long, a man named Wang Tiazhong came under scrutiny. His nickname, in fact, was Wang Yijian. He was a local resident of Mangcheng County. The origin of this nickname raised even more concern. People called him Wang Yijian because Wang Tiazhong always carried a knife with him. As police dug deeper into Wang Tiazhong's background, they made another unexpected discovery. He had close ties to a man named Wang Deli. The two men closely matched the descriptions of suspects involved in a series of other robberies. Prior to the Mangcheng family massacre, more than a dozen violent robberies had occurred in areas surrounding Mangcheng County. Victims' descriptions of the perpetrators' physical builds aligned closely with the two men surnamed Wang. The method was always the same. One attacker wielded a knife, the other carried a metal rod, and they kicked in doors before storming into homes. Coincidentally, and disturbingly, this method was strikingly similar to the Mangcheng massacre. Even the way the victims were beaten and repeatedly stabbed when they resisted was nearly identical. Police quickly mobilized and arrested Wang Tiezhong and Wang Deli. The arrests went smoothly, and both men soon confessed to their involvement in the series of robberies. However, when it came to the massacre of Dai Zhongwei's family, they adamantly denied responsibility, insisting they were not the killers. DNA comparisons later confirmed that neither man's DNA matched the killer's profiles found at the crime scene. With no solid evidence, the case once again hit a dead end. Investigators turned their attention back to the piece of white fabric. What did OS 10 actually mean? It turned out that sewing a small fabric tag into the lining of a garment was a common practice used by dry cleaning shops to mark clothing belonging to customers who had not yet paid. Wang Yijian OS 10 meant that this jacket, belonging to Wang Tiezhong, still had 10 RMB in unpaid cleaning fees. Police went on to investigate every dry cleaning shop in Mangcheng County, more than 70 shops, large and small. Yet none of them claimed to have ever seen the black jacket. Time continued to pass, and the case showed no signs of progress. Investigators repeatedly re-examined every lead, searching desperately for a breakthrough. Eventually, their focus returned to the abandoned well. This time, what caught their attention was its location. The well was hidden in vast farmland, remote and secluded. Not only would outsiders be unlikely to know it existed, even many local residents might not have known there was a well in the fields. Moreover, it was late at night, and the killers had been fleeing in panic. How could they have located the well so quickly and precisely in order to hide the evidence? Police concluded that the killers were likely local villagers who were intimately familiar with the terrain. They immediately began investigating nearby villages, especially those closest to the well. At the same time, officers collected blood samples from more than 1,000 villagers. Yet, after extensive testing and comparison, none of the DNA matched the killers' profiles. Just as investigators were reaching another impasse, one unusually curious villager caught their attention. During the canvassing process, police noticed one individual behaving strangely. His name was He Fengshui. He was repeatedly seen secretly watching the police as they conducted their searches. Wherever officers went, he followed. At times, he even asked detailed questions about the case. Although He Fengshui's behavior was suspicious, police initially ruled him out because his DNA did not match the crime scene. The only connection between He Fengshui and the case was his son, He Mingming, who had once worked briefly at the Mangcheng store. Based on genetic inheritance, excluding He Fengshui also meant excluding Mingming. However, He Fengshui's intense interest in the case went far beyond ordinary curiosity. This once again drew police attention. Further investigation revealed that the person closest to He Fengshui was Mingming. Logically and emotionally, only Mingming could have driven He Fengshui to obsessively gather information about the investigation. Police then proposed a bold hypothesis. What if Mingming was not He Fengshui's biological son? Officers immediately collected a blood sample from Mingming. Further inquiry revealed that Mingming was, in fact, adopted by He Fengshui. DNA testing confirmed that the two were not biologically related. Even more significantly, Mingming's DNA matched the blood of one of the killers found at the crime scene. In other words, He Mingming was one of the two perpetrators behind the Mangcheng family massacre. With the evidence confirmed, police immediately prepared to arrest He Mingming, but by then, he had already disappeared. Further investigation revealed that while working at Mangcheng, Mingming had left behind his QQ account number on the store's computer. Police devised a classic honey trap to lure him out. Using the QQ number, officers posed as an online girlfriend and added Ming Ming as a contact. Through their conversations, police learned that Ming Ming had fled to Nong'an County, Jilin Province. During the chats, Ming Ming also revealed that he had been feeling emotionally low and mildly depressed. Seizing the opportunity, officers gently offered comfort, gradually gaining his trust. Once they were certain Ming Ming had taken the bait, police claimed that they too were in Nong'an County and suggested meeting in person. Ming Ming agreed almost immediately. Police then mobilized a task force to prepare for Ming Ming's arrest in Nong'an County. However, the operation took an unexpected turn. Just as officers arrived in Nong'an, Ming Ming suddenly went silent. On the day of their scheduled meeting, he never showed up. Police continued investigating in Nong'an for several days, but found nothing. Just as the case reached another dead end, the Nong'an County Funeral Home reported an unclaimed male body. Police immediately went to verify the identity. Based on facial features and a tattoo on the chest, officers confirmed that the deceased was Ming Ming. After finally locating a key suspect, he was now dead. The situation raised countless questions. Forensic experts immediately conducted an autopsy. Toxicology tests revealed a large amount of the pesticide metamil in Ming Ming's stomach. Metamil is an extremely toxic substance. Ming Ming had died from pesticide poisoning. With assistance from Nong'an police, investigators quickly determined the location of Ming Ming's death. He had died in a room at a small roadside inn. After the body was discovered, the inn had been closed. When found, Ming Ming was neatly dressed, lying quietly on the bed. The room had not been disturbed, which provided ideal conditions for a thorough forensic examination. The room was tidy, no signs of disorder or struggle. On the floor, police found an empty bottle of peanut milk. Forensic testing detected metamil residue in the remaining liquid. Metamil has an extremely strong, irritating odor that cannot be masked, even when mixed into peanut milk. This ruled out the possibility that someone else had secretly poisoned him. The orderly room, the poisoned drink, and Ming Ming's calm posture all pointed to a voluntary ingestion of poison. However, something didn't add up. Police also found numerous hair clippings on the bed. Ming Ming appeared to have recently gotten a haircut. Why would someone who intended to drink pesticide take the time to groom himself in his final moments? Investigators visited the barbershop across the street from the inn. The staff confirmed that Ming Ming had gotten a haircut to meet an online girlfriend, but the timing was strange. He had the haircut on the afternoon of the day he died. That raised a disturbing question. If he had gone to such lengths to prepare for a date, why would he choose to end his life instead? At the same time, inn staff stated that Ming Ming had checked in alone. So had his accomplice fled with him? That seemed unlikely. Ming Ming's death was riddled with unanswered questions. Police suspected that his death was likely connected to his missing accomplice. During the investigation, one inn employee recalled a suspicious detail. On the night Ming Ming died, after returning to the inn, he knocked on the door of another room. After knocking several times with no response, he returned to his own room. Based on the timeline provided by staff, police believed that shortly after returning to his room, Ming Ming drank the poison. Notably, this was right after he had returned from getting his haircut. That meant the person in the room Ming Ming had knocked on could be the key to solving the case. Using the guest registry, police identified the occupant of that room as Yu Liu. The man had checked in on the same day as Ming Ming. Police quickly uncovered Liu's background. He was 36 years old, from Longhua County, Hebei Province. The day after Ming Ming's death, Liu had checked out and left the inn. When police searched his room, it had already been cleaned and any trace of Liu had been completely erased. Just as investigators were growing frustrated, they made a crucial discovery. From the window of Liu's room, one could see the barbershop where Ming Ming had gotten his haircut. This led police to suspect that Ming Ming had been under Liu's surveillance. What appeared to be a voluntary death may, in fact, have been carefully orchestrated by Liu. Whether uncovering the truth behind the Yongkang massacre or unraveling the mystery of Ming Ming's death, one thing was clear. Lai Yu had to be found. According to the inn's registration records, Lai Yu had not attempted to conceal his identity, which allowed police to track him more easily. A nationwide wanted notice was issued. Not long afterward, police in Harbin reported that Lai Yu had surfaced there. 2 days later, police finally apprehended Lai Yu in Harbin. DNA comparison confirmed that Lai Yu was the second perpetrator in the Mangcheng family massacre. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Lai Yu quickly confessed to his crimes. According to Lai Yu's confession, he and Ming had met while working at a restaurant in Ningbo. Ming was a kitchen assistant, while Lai Yu was the head chef and Ming's mentor. Ming also became acquainted with Lai Yu's girlfriend, Wang Ruihua. As the three grew close, they became dissatisfied with their meager earnings and began harboring criminal intentions. After discussing their options, they set their sights on Zhong Wei, the owner of a rolling shutter shop. Ming had previously worked short-term at Zhong Wei's home, was familiar with the layout, and knew the family was wealthy. The two men traveled to Mangcheng County to scout the area around Zhong Wei's house. But because the household had many occupants, Lai Yu initially wanted to back out. Ming, however, was determined to go through with it. After repeated surveillance, the two finally decided to strike. At approximately 11 p.m. on April 9, 2010, the two men, armed with knives, climbed into Zhong Wei's workshop through a restroom window. Once inside, Lai Yu grabbed a steel pipe. They then climbed through a west-facing window to enter the house. Upon reaching the second floor, they split up. Ming went to the west bedroom while Lai Yu headed to the east bedroom. Zhong Wei's family was inside the east bedroom, the door locked from the inside. Lai Yu kicked the door open, but Zhong Wei fought back. Lai Yu swung the steel pipe with full force, striking Zhong Wei on the head. Unable to withstand the blow, Zhong Wei collapsed to the floor. After subduing Zhong Wei, Lai Yu forced the three members of Zhong Wei's family to stand against the wall while he took the opportunity to search for valuables. Unexpectedly, the moment Lai Yu turned his back, Zhong Wei and his wife lunged forward and managed to restrain him. At that exact moment, Zhong Wei's son, Dai Jianye, immediately shut the bedroom door and called the police. Meanwhile, Ming had already finished killing Zhong Wei's parents-in-law in the west room and quickly rushed to the east room. He kicked the door open and saw Zhong Wei and his wife struggling with Lai Yu. Ming immediately attacked with a knife. In the end, Ming and Lai Yu brutally murdered all three members of Zhong Wei's immediate family in the east room. Out of sheer cruelty, Lai Yu even stabbed Zhong Wei and his wife again after they were already dead. Because Zhong Wei's son had called the police, the two attackers managed to grab only 1,800 yuan at the scene. They did not even have time to pick up the cash that had fallen on the floor before fleeing in panic. Before escaping, Lai Yu, calculating to the very end, used Zhang Baomei's bloody fingerprint to frame Jianli. According to their original plan, after the crime, Ming was supposed to flee to Xinjiang, while Lai Yu would escape to Changchun. Before running, Ming called his adoptive father, He Fengshui, asking him to prepare clothes and money for his escape. After obtaining travel funds from He Fengshui, Ming prepared to flee to Xinjiang as planned. However, Lai Yu suddenly changed his mind. He claimed that fleeing separately was unsafe, and that sticking together would allow them to look out for each other. Ming believed Lai Yu was concerned for his safety and immediately agreed. What he did not realize was that he had already fallen into Lai Yu's trap, one he would sink deeper into with every step. On April 11th, the two men arrived in Changchun and met Wang Ruihua. On April 12th, all three met again. Wang Ruihua knew that the two men had committed the massacre in Mangcheng County, yet she said nothing and still gave them money to help them escape. After parting ways with Wang Ruihua, Lai Yu secretly began planning his own escape. As soon as they arrived in Nong'an County, Lai Yu bought 2 bottles of pesticide. He gave 1 bottle to Ming and lied to him, saying that if there was no way out, they would drink the poison together. Ming was physically strong, but mentally simple. He trusted Lai Yu completely. In their relationship, which was always dominated by Lai Yu, Ming followed his every word. He firmly believed that if there was no escape, the two of them would die together, just as Lai Yu had promised. What Ming did not know was that from the moment the robbery plan was conceived, Lai Yu had been guarding against him. Throughout the entire crime, Lai Yu deliberately stayed in the shadows. Aside from breaking into the house at night, almost all criminal actions were carried out by Ming. Every clue pointed directly to Ming. As long as Ming was dead, Lai Yu could sever all ties to the massacre. Ming was nothing more than a human shield protecting Lai Yu's life. That was why Lai Yu only felt safe when Ming was under his control. For Lai Yu, the moment he sensed danger, only Ming's death could ensure his escape. When they arrived in Nong'an County, the two checked into the inn separately. To monitor Ming, Lai Yu stayed in the room directly across from him. After only a few days at the inn, Ming proudly told Lai Yu that he planned to get a haircut to meet his online girlfriend. Lai Yu immediately became alert. He suspected that this mysterious online girlfriend was very likely a police decoy. Although he verbally brushed it off and acted unconcerned, he had already made his decision. The following night, Lai Yu went to Ming and frightened him, claiming that the police had already discovered them and that escape was no longer possible. After manipulating him with fear and despair, Lai Yu told Ming that if there was no way out, drinking poison was better than going to prison and losing one's freedom. Ming, naive and terrified, was completely shaken. Lai Yu was Ming's emotional anchor. Seeing Lai Yu seemingly ready to act, Ming prepared to follow him. The next afternoon, Lai Yu hid in his room and happened to see Ming walk into a barbershop. The sight enraged him. Ming had clearly not abandoned the idea of meeting the online girlfriend. Lai Yu immediately sent Ming a message. "I've already drunk the poison. You should drink yours too." After finishing his haircut, Ming saw the message. Already in a bad emotional state, he became even more frightened and anxious. He immediately texted and called Lai Yu repeatedly, but received no response. Back at the inn, Ming did not believe that Lai Yu had really drunk the poison, so he went and knocked on Lai Yu's door. Lai Yu was hiding inside and remained silent. After knocking several times with no answer, Ming assumed that Lai Yu had already carried out their pact. Ming returned to his room, fell deeper into despair, poured the pesticide into a bottle of peanut milk, and drank it all. After seeing that Ming returned to his room and never came out again, Lai Yu knew he had achieved his goal. The next day, he checked out of the inn and went to Changchun to meet his girlfriend, Wang Ruihua. With financial support from her, Lai Yu then fled to Harbin. He did not expect that shortly after arriving there, he would be arrested by police. In the end, Lai Yu believed that by carefully orchestrating Ming's death, he could finally live a normal life without fear. But he was far too naive. His seemingly perfect plan collapsed effortlessly under meticulous police investigation. In court, Lai Yu expressed deep remorse for his actions, but compared to the 6 lives lost because of him, such regret came far too late. Ultimately, Lai Yu was sentenced to death and executed. He Fang Sui, who had helped conceal He Ming, along with Wang Ruihua, the girlfriend who aided Lai Yu, were also prosecuted according to the law. The 2 main perpetrators and their accomplices all received their rightful punishment, offering some measure of justice to the 5 members of Zhang Wei's family, whose lives were brutally taken. But this tragedy was not the only one. 1 year earlier, on the opposite side of the world from China, a man was also living the American dream he had spent his entire life building. And he never imagined that the person who would destroy everything was someone close to him, someone he had never once suspected. The story took place in the town of North Wales, Pennsylvania. It is a quiet, peaceful town in Montgomery County, located about 25 miles from the major city of Philadelphia. This is a typical American middle-class community, where neighbors are friendly and look out for one another. The town has low crime, and children can safely play in the streets, a stark contrast to the high crime rates in nearby Philadelphia. The Che family was very much part of this picture-perfect community. As first-generation immigrants, Robert Che and Janice Che lived a stable and comfortable life here. The couple had 2 grown children, their son Joseph Che and their daughter Anna Che. For Joseph, who grew up in this environment, A comfortable life felt natural, as if this was simply how life was meant to be. But for his father, Robert Che, this sense of security was something he had fought for with everything he had. Robert Che was originally named Che Chan-sik, born in a poor village in South Korea. His childhood was marked by extreme hardship. At night, his home had no electricity, and he had to grope through darkness. During the freezing winters, the young boy was forced to climb the mountains alone to chop firewood just to keep warm. Determined to escape poverty and change his fate, Che Chan-sik enlisted in the military, which finally allowed him to leave his village. After completing his service, he crossed the Pacific Ocean to the United States with only a few $100s and a burning desire for a new life. When he first arrived in America, he spoke no English at all and had nothing to his name. He truly started from zero. Through relentless hard work and perseverance, he eventually became a U.S. citizen, adopted the American name Robert Che, and married a gentle Korean woman named Janice Che. The couple had sharp business instincts. They believed that women's love for beauty was timeless, and that the cosmetics industry would never go out of style. With that belief, they opened a cosmetics shop. The business grew steadily from nothing, becoming increasingly successful, and eventually allowed them to purchase a large home in North Wales. It was the most classic version of the American dream. Through hard work and determination, you could build a better future for your family. But in the early morning hours of January 9th, 2009, that beautiful dream came to an abrupt end. It was still dark outside when the couple, as usual, woke early to prepare to open their store. Robert Che stepped outside first and started the car to warm up the engine. Janice Che stayed in the warm garage putting on her shoes. In that most ordinary of moments, the nightmare struck. 3 men dressed in black, like shadows, suddenly stormed into the garage, shattering the morning silence in an instant. Robert Che tried to fight back to protect his wife, but he was quickly beaten and brutally restrained on the ground. Meanwhile, their 2 children upstairs were still fast asleep. Not long after, Joseph Che was jolted awake by the noise and blinding light. A flashlight was shining directly into his face, and several dark gun barrels were pointed at him. Joseph was severely nearsighted. Without his glasses, all he could see were tall, blurry silhouettes moving around him, while harsh voices shouted at him to get up. He was then roughly dragged downstairs. At the same time, their daughter Anna Che was awakened by violent banging on her door. She stepped out of her bedroom to see what was happening, but before she could even scream, another gunman blocked her path. Terror enveloped the family in an instant. Both siblings were taken to the cold, dark basement, where their hands and feet were tightly bound. Their mother was also tied up there, but their father, Robert Che, was nowhere to be seen. At that moment, the guard on watch appeared to need to check something and temporarily left the basement. This was a life or death moment. Anna Che reacted quickly, seizing this fleeting chance. She immediately signaled to her mother. Janice Che understood at once. Seizing the only opportunity she would have, she gathered all her strength and sprinted through the basement's back door, running for her life. Janice Che's escape became a critical turning point in the entire case. She ran desperately to a neighbor's house, pounding frantically on the door and begging for help. When the intruders realized someone had escaped, they feared police would arrive at any moment and fled the scene. After confirming the men had left, Joseph Che struggled to free himself, then untied his sister and quickly locked the door in case the attackers returned. But at that moment, he had no idea what horrific scene awaited him in the garage. Officer Joseph McGowan of the Montgomery County Police Department was working the night shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. The previous 11 hours had been quiet. As he was preparing to refuel his patrol car before handing it over to the next shift, his radio suddenly crackled with an alert, reporting an armed robbery in progress. Officer Joseph McGowan had 12 years of law enforcement experience. Early in his career, he worked for the Philadelphia Police Department, where he witnessed every kind of violence imaginable. It was for the safety and peace of mind of their family that his wife eventually persuaded him to transfer to the quieter town of North Wales. But as he drove toward Robert Che's home that morning, the scene unfolding before him felt like a return to the dark moments of his past. Mrs. Che, Janice Che, was in a state of extreme panic. Tape was still stuck in her hair, and her eyes were filled with terror. She screamed uncontrollably, begging the police to save her husband. Officer McGowan did not hesitate. He kicked in the locked front door. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. There were none of the signs of chaotic ransacking one might expect. With his weapon drawn, McGowan moved upstairs and found Joseph Che and Anna Che, both still in shock. After confirming that the children were unharmed and following their directions, officers moved toward the garage. Along the hallway leading to the laundry area, splattered bloodstains on the walls immediately signaled that something far more horrific lay ahead. When McGowan entered the garage, even with his experience at homicide scenes, he felt a chill run through him. Robert Che, also known as Che Chan-sik, age 58, lay on the cold concrete floor, his body curled in a large pool of blood, showing no signs of life. His hands were bound behind his back, and his legs were tightly restrained. Most horrifying of all was his head. The attackers had wrapped layer upon layer of silver industrial tape around his entire head, leaving only a small patch of hair exposed at the top. He looked almost like a mummy. Beside the body, police found a blood-soaked knife. Police quickly secured the scene and called in K-9 units and the fire department to search the surrounding area, hoping to recover evidence or items discarded by the suspects. The search, however, yielded no results. Detective Michael Santarelli was urgently called in to assist with the investigation. Before becoming a homicide detective, he had worked as a crime scene photographer, accustomed to documenting brutal realities through a cold, unflinching lens. This time, however, he needed to look beyond appearances to uncover the truth. After launching the investigation, Santarelli first conducted detailed interviews with the 3 surviving family members. Despite their extreme trauma, Janice Che and Anna Che provided a critical breakthrough. They had seen the attackers' faces clearly. The intruders were not wearing masks. According to the family's description, the attackers were black males dressed in dark hooded sweatshirts. One of them was large and powerfully built, physically intimidating. The other was slimmer and had a noticeable beard. Based on these detailed descriptions, police quickly produced 2 composite sketches of the suspects. The autopsy report later revealed that Robert Che did not die from stab wounds or gunshot injuries. Instead, his official cause of death was asphyxiation. This was not a simple case of suffocation by force, but the result of extreme blunt force trauma to his face and head, which caused massive bleeding into his nasal and oral cavities. Because his mouth had been sealed shut with tape and his nasal passages were blocked by clotted blood, his own blood flowed into his lungs, ultimately causing him to suffocate to death. The medical examiner also concluded that Robert Che had been bound with tape before he was beaten because once heavy bleeding began, the tape could no longer adhere to the skin. This meant that Robert Che was completely defenseless at the time of the assault. Police initially believed the crime to be an armed robbery. The family had been robbed of cash, jewelry, designer handbags, and all the money inside their safe. Although a significant amount of property was stolen, the level of brutality, culminating in murder, made it feel far from a random crime. Inside the Che family safe, investigators confirmed there had been more than $15,000 in cash. This raised a troubling question. Had the attackers simply gotten lucky, or had they known in advance that a large sum of money was stored there? If the crime had been planned, then the house must have been under surveillance. Police conducted extensive interviews with neighbors. One garbage truck driver provided a crucial lead. Several days before the attack, he had noticed a car parked outside the Che residence with 3 black men inside, staring intently at the house. This observation further confirmed that the Che family had been targeted and watched. Police theorized that the attackers may have followed the Che family home from their cosmetics store. Investigators quickly pulled surveillance footage from the shop, and sure enough, they spotted 2 men loitering inside the store. They made no purchases and did not ask any questions. Instead, they pretended to browse the nail polish aisle while closely watching the employees. Their physical appearance closely matched the descriptions provided by the Che family. However, When the Che family reviewed the footage, they were unable to definitively identify these two men as the intruders who had broken into their home. What initially appeared to be the most promising lead suddenly turned into another dead end. At the same time, forensic specialists brought a glimmer of hope to the case. They proposed a bold hypothesis. If the attackers had torn the duct tape by hand without scissors, it was highly likely they had bit through it with their teeth. Based on this theory, technicians closely examined the torn edges of the tape. As expected, they successfully recovered trace amounts of saliva from the ripped sections. In addition, from a small fragment of a black rubber glove found in a pool of blood in the garage, forensic experts extracted skin tissue from a fingertip. These two biological samples belonged to two completely different individuals. This meant police now had biological profiles of the two attackers directly involved in Robert Che's murder, one responsible for restraining him, the other for beating him. The grim reality, however, was that investigators still had no suspects to compare the DNA against. As the investigation stalled, a series of crimes targeting Asian Americans in the Philadelphia area caught the attention of Kim Jin-ju, a prosecutor specializing in cases involving vulnerable victims. As a Korean American herself, Kim Jin-ju felt both a deep sense of pride and an acute understanding of the struggles faced by immigrant communities. She pointed out that at the time, armed robberies targeting Asian-owned businesses in the Philadelphia region had surged dramatically. In just 2 months, approximately 15 such robberies had occurred. Criminal groups often relied on stereotypes, believing that Asian Americans kept large amounts of cash at home and were less likely to report crimes or cooperate with police due to language barriers or cultural reasons. These criminals behaved like hunters, surveilling Asian-owned restaurants, grocery stores, and beauty shops, following business owners home, and then carrying out armed robberies. What happened to the Che family fit this pattern with unsettling precision. However, when investigators compared these cases more closely, they discovered a crucial difference. In other robberies targeting Asian Americans, the attackers typically wore masks, focused solely on stealing money, used firearms to intimidate victims, and fled quickly. Fatalities were extremely rare. In the Che family case, however, the attackers not only did not wear masks, openly exposing their faces, but also used exceptional brutality. This lack of disguise sent a chill through investigators. In criminal psychology, when perpetrators make no effort to conceal their identities, it often points to a terrifying conclusion. They do not intend to leave any witnesses alive. The attackers did not wear masks because they planned to kill everyone in the house. Had Janice Che not seized the opportunity to escape, had she not reached a neighbor in time, the entire Che family of 4 might have been wiped out. This realization pushed police to a heightened state of urgency. The 3 surviving members of the Che family were likely at serious risk of being silenced, since they had seen the attackers' faces. To ensure their safety, police placed the Che family under round-the-clock protective surveillance. After numerous leads collapsed, one investigator recalled a detail the victims had mentioned earlier. During the attack, the intruders had repeatedly used their cell phones to make calls, and one of them even complained on the phone that the money was insufficient. This suggested that there might have been accomplices outside, either coordinating or standing by to assist. Police then obtained cell phone tower records from all mobile base stations near the Che residence during the time of the crime. It was a massive data undertaking. But within this enormous volume of information, investigators identified at least 3 cell phones that had been frequently communicating with one another during the window of the attack. Although these phones were all prepaid burner phones purchased to avoid tracking, making it impossible to immediately identify their owners, police were able to analyze the call network patterns and discovered that one of the devices had communicated with a phone registered under a real name. That registered number belonged to Angelo Shin, a 25-year-old Korean American with a minor prior drug offense. And most critically of all, he was the nephew of the victim, Robert Che. The discovery was devastating. In Korean culture, family bonds are deeply rooted, and blood ties are sacred. Years earlier, when Angelo's parents were not living in the United States, Robert and Janice Che had opened their home to him as if he were their own son. Angelo lived with the Che family throughout high school. They supported his education and cared for his daily needs. Joseph Che treated him like a real brother. The two grew up together, sharing everything without secrets. What followed was even more chilling. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a fact that made their blood run cold. In an effort to locate Angelo, Detective Santarelli called Joseph Che to ask whether he knew where his cousin might be. The response on the other end of the line made the detective's heart sink. Joseph and Anna Che were at Angelo's house at that very moment. After the murder, Angelo had proactively shown concern, inviting his now homeless cousins to stay with him. At that moment, the surviving members of the Che family were living under the same roof as the man suspected of orchestrating the murder. This meant Angelo could have been monitoring the victims at close range and at any time could have finished what he started, silencing the remaining witnesses. To avoid alerting the suspect and to ensure the hostage's safety, Santarelli forced himself to remain calm and carefully instructed Joseph to bring Angelo to the police station under the pretense of answering routine questions. When Joseph Che, Anna Che, and Angelo arrived at the station, officers immediately separated them. Only after confirming that the Che siblings were in a completely secure environment did detectives reveal the truth. Angelo was suspected of being involved in their father's murder. The revelation hit Joseph and Anna like a collapse of the sky. Their minds went blank. They could not comprehend that the cousin who had once lived with them and who was now pretending to be their protector could be the very person responsible for tearing their family apart. In the interrogation room, Angelo initially tried to portray himself as a devoted nephew, swearing he was willing to provide any assistance necessary. But when police confronted him with the call records linked to specific phone numbers, his lies unraveled on their own. Even so, investigators still lacked sufficient evidence to charge him with murder. However, they were not prepared to let him walk free. Taking a calculated risk, police detained Angelo on charges of providing false information to law enforcement. After 24 hours in custody, faced with the undeniable call records as hard evidence, Angelo's psychological defenses completely collapsed. Realizing the situation was beyond saving and hoping for leniency, he decided to confess everything. It all began when Angelo boasted to his friends that his uncle's home was wealthy and that there was always a large amount of cash in the family safe. One of those friends was Joseph Page, nicknamed Tree Man, a Philadelphia local who claimed to be skilled at breaking into homes. Upon hearing this, the seed of greed was planted. The two quickly reached an agreement and began planning a robbery targeting Angelo's own relatives. Angelo confessed to everything he knew about the Che family, including their daily routines, what kind of car they drove, and, most critically, he drew a detailed floor plan of his uncle's home, clearly marking the exact location of the safe. He even took part in planning meetings, personally saw the guns, knives, and heavy-duty duct tape his accomplices had prepared. Although Angelo tried to justify himself by claiming he never expected anyone to be hurt and only intended to steal some money, the moment he saw those deadly weapons, he fully understood the danger and the potential consequences. Yet he chose to remain silent and allow it to happen. The criminal group consisted of 7 participants. In addition to the inside man, Angelo, Joseph Page recruited Amata Dalam and Carrie Pitts to carry out the home invasion. Another 3 individuals were responsible for driving the getaway vehicles and acting as lookouts. After the crime, when Angelo learned that his uncle had been killed, he confronted Joseph Page, asking why the situation had escalated to murder. But Page's concern lay elsewhere. He angrily complained over the phone that the cash they had stolen was far less than expected. When Angelo pressed him, Page responded coldly, "I did what I had to do." In the end, the blood money obtained at the cost of an innocent life was split among all 7 participants. Angelo's reward for betraying his own family was a mere $2,000. For those $2,000, he destroyed the uncle who had raised him, left his aunt a widow, robbed his cousins of their father, and condemned himself to prison. With Angelo's confession in hand, police immediately issued arrest warrants for the remaining suspects. At this point, forensic science played a decisive role. Biological samples collected from the arrested suspects matched perfectly with the DNA recovered from the duct tape and gloves at the crime scene. The skin tissue inside the glove belonged to Joseph Page, one of the masterminds. The saliva on the tape definitively linked Amada Delam. The evidence clearly established that these two men were the ones who directly assaulted Robert Che and caused his death. In September 2009, Angelo pleaded guilty to third-degree murder and was sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison. Joseph Page and Amada Delam, as the primary perpetrators, attempted to defend themselves in court, but the overwhelming evidence rendered their arguments ineffective. Both were convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to long prison terms. Julius Wise and Robert Ittman, who were responsible for facilitating the escape, were also convicted of third-degree murder due to their participation in the crime. Unfortunately, Kerry Pitts, the man accused of being the third intruder inside the house, was ultimately acquitted. No biological evidence tying him to the crime scene was found, and the victim's family, still in a state of extreme trauma, was unable to identify him with certainty in court. Although most of the perpetrators were brought to justice, the wounds suffered by the surviving members of the Chai family will never fully heal. At his father's funeral, Joseph Che looked at the person who was once family and was now a murderer. The confusion and rage inside him were impossible to put into words. Even today, he tries to find reasons to explain his cousin's actions, believing that Angelo fell into the wrong crowd and was corrupted by a toxic environment. If you stay close to ink, you'll be stained black. Stay close to light, and you'll shine. This ancient saying manifested itself in the most painful way in his life. Dear viewers, 2 cases, 2 continents, but the same bitter lesson. The most dangerous enemy does not always come from the outside. Sometimes they are the person sitting right beside you every day. Living with kindness does not guarantee you will only meet kind people. But that does not mean we should stop trusting others. It means we must learn to see people more clearly. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below.